Not a single call came through. After years of service, the deployments that bled into one another, the surgeries that pieced me back together, the constant threat of death, and the grief of burying my comrades. I checked my phone. A solitary message from my father was waiting. Change of plans for Christmas. It's probably for the best if you don't come this year. There was no inquiry about my well-being, no mention of being missed. It was a blunt dismissal, a termination of familial connection from the very people whose love was supposed to be a given. My name is Ethan Monroe. Have you ever navigated a war zone only to find the real battle was waiting for you at home, behind a door your family wanted to keep shut? The military had conditioned me to compartmentalize my emotions, but that text message struck with the force of an explosion. My mother remained silent. My sister Chloe offered no protest. A silent consensus had apparently been reached. I was to be exiled before the holidays even began. I sat in my sparse Fayetteville apartment, the festive lights I'd hung in the window now feeling like a cruel joke, and I tried to comprehend what I had done to merit such a profound rejection. My reply was a single curt word: understood. It was not the kind of response that begs for more questions or offers a chance for reconciliation. It was a full stop, a declaration that they would not be given another opportunity to wound me on. I closed my computer, erased the flight confirmation I had received weeks ago, and poured myself a measure of whiskey. I lifted the glass to the empty apartment, to family. 5 days later, my phone was flooded with 10 missed calls. 1 from Chloe, 1 from my father, 4 from my mother, and a final one from their legal counsel. That last one sent a jolt through me. By that point, the course I had set was irreversible. Their words could not be taken back. The certified letter I had dispatched could not be recalled. They must have assumed I would crawl back as I always had, dependable, forgiving, and desperate for their affection. But I was no longer that boy. I had returned with a different kind of resolve, and they were about to witness the strength of a son who had finally ceased seeking his father's validation. Let me set the scene. Before the cold silence, before the dismissive text, before the ultimate betrayal that solidified my new path. I was 18 when I took the oath. My father offered no embrace at my graduation, only the terse advice to try to conduct yourself with some dignity out there. That was his brand of affection, criticism veiled as guidance. I hadn't joined to earn his pride, though. I joined because I needed to forge a sense of self-worth, something that was impossible in a home where I was treated as an unforeseen inconvenience. When I earned my sergeant stripes, I flew home for the holidays, clinging to a sliver of hope for some acknowledgement. Before my boots were even off, he instructed me to clear the snow from the driveway. No congratulations. No expression of pride. Just another task. My mother was a whisper of the parent I needed, constantly fretting and murmuring, "Let's not upset your father." And Chloe, my sister, learned from a young age that aligning with him was the simplest way to maintain household peace. So I fulfilled my duty as the good son. I never missed a birthday call. I sent flowers for their anniversary. I wired funds whenever the roof sprang a leak or the car gave out. They never questioned the source of the money or the personal cost to me. They simply accepted it, occasionally sending a perfunctory thank you. Despite it all, I hoped. Every year, I hoped for a Christmas where my presence would be a source of joy, not a tolerated obligation, a holiday where I felt truly welcome. But this year, my plans had changed. My service was complete. I had my discharge papers, a modest pension, and a heart heavy with weariness. All I had wanted was to come home, help my mother in the kitchen, listen to Chloe's stories about her job, and maybe, just maybe, receive a nod of approval from my dad. Instead, I received that text. That message spurred me to action. 5 years prior, during a brief leave, my father had asked me to co-sign a second mortgage on the house. I was just 25. He assured me it was a mere formality. I was young, worn out, and desperate for a sign of his approval. I signed the document without reading the fine print. A critical error. For them. Because as I now knew, I held a 51% controlling interest in their home. They were still ignorant of this fact. But their enlightenment was imminent. The irony was that the mortgage had completely slipped my mind. It was only after my father's text message ignited a cold fire within me that I began sifting through old digital files, searching for a distraction. And there it was. A scanned copy of the co-signing agreement, marked executed. His signature. My signature. Stamped, witnessed, and legally ironclad. I examined it again, more meticulously this time, and there, couched in dense legal terminology, was a phrase I had previously overlooked. In the event of primary borrower default or voluntary transfer of deed, the co-signer shall assume controlling interest of the property until the loan's full maturity. Controlling interest. The words hung in the air. I was floored. In his haste to cast me aside, he had forgotten that on paper, I was not just his son, I was his majority partner. He had needed my pristine credit to secure that refinance 5 years ago, and I had signed like an obedient soldier, believing it was a step toward earning my place. Now, it meant I owned the very symbol of his pride. The house he boasted about to his friends. The same house from which I had just been barred. The poetic justice was so potent, it was almost tangible. That evening, I contacted a lawyer, a real estate specialist I had met at a seminar. Hypothetically, I posed, what are the legal ramifications if a co-signer holding a majority interest is informed by the primary borrower that he is no longer welcome in the home? A brief silence was followed by a dry laugh. The primary borrower shouldn't have done that, the lawyer stated. Because if the co-signer wishes to exercise his control over the property, he is well within his rights to do so. I kept my own counsel. Instead of a phone call, I drafted a letter. It was devoid of emotion. It was factual, formal, and devastatingly effective. Effective immediately, I am exercising my controlling interest as the legal co-owner of the property at 12 Winmere Lane. All legal matters will now be handled by my counsel, who will be in contact shortly. I sent it via certified mail, a deliberate, old-fashioned choice. I wanted them to open it together to feel the gravity of the document in their hands. Then, I rented a secluded cabin in the Smoky Mountains for Christmas. I let the snow fall and the fire burn, and I turned off my phone. 5 days later, I powered it back on. 10 missed calls, the last from their attorney. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a smile of revenge, but of clarity. For the first time, I didn't need their invitation to come home. I was home. Because they were residing in a house that was, by law, mine. Chloe was the first to break the silence. "Ethan, what is going on? Dad is hysterical. He's talking about lawyers and being evicted. What have you done?" I gazed at the snow-covered landscape outside my window. "I'm exercising my rights, Chloe," I said, my voice even. "Just as Dad exercised his right to tell me not to come home." "You're going to make them homeless because of a stupid text?" "No," I corrected her, letting the pause stretch. "I'm not making them homeless. Not yet." She was incredulous. "Ethan, it's Dad. You know how he is." "I do," I affirmed. "And that is precisely the point. The people who inflict the most pain are often the ones who are most certain you will never retaliate. They rely on your history of silence, on your need for their validation. But I'm not looking for crumbs anymore. I have a legally binding contract, and for the first time in my life, I hold the power." The subsequent call was from their lawyer, Harold Wells. He attempted a congenial tone, but the underlying panic was unmistakable. "Mr. Monroe, I'm confident this is all a simple misunderstanding. Your letter, while unexpected, has caused considerable distress." I cut him short. "There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Wells. The document is valid. I possess the original. My attorney has reviewed the terms. I am invoking my controlling interest." A beat of silence. "Well," he stammered, "I'm sure we can find an amicable solution. A buyout, perhaps." And in that moment, I understood. They were afraid. My father must have defaulted on the payments again, assuming the bank would be forgiving. But now, he wasn't dealing with a faceless institution. He was dealing with me. I leaned back. "I am willing to negotiate," I said softly. "However, my first term is that he must call me himself, not through you, not through Chloe. I want him to ask." Harold fell silent. He understood. This was never about the house. It was about respect. I ended the call and surveyed the quiet cabin. There was no tree, no stockings, no aroma of a holiday feast. But there was tranquility. A tranquility I had earned with my scars and my service. They were not yet aware of it, but my time as the dutiful, ignored son was over. I was now the landlord, and their Christmas was about to take a very uncomfortable turn. On Christmas morning, another call came. It was my mother. "Ethan," she pleaded, her voice thin and strained. "Please stop this. Your father is a wreck. He hasn't slept. Chloe is distraught. Can't we just put this behind us?" Put it behind us? The question was so absurd I almost laughed. "Mom," I said gently, "do you recall the message he sent me?" Silence. "He told me I was not welcome for Christmas. Do you understand what that does to a person who has spent a decade in combat zones, sending money home, never missing a single family occasion?" More silence. I continued. "On my 26th birthday, my unit was ambushed outside of Kabul. The first thing I did when I got back to the base was call you, just to let you know I was alive. Do you remember your response? I don't remember, she whispered. You said, I'm glad you're safe, but please don't mention this to your father. It will only make him anxious. And that was the heart of it. The truth they had all tiptoed around for years. I was not a cherished son. I was a source of anxiety, an inconvenience. Mom, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. I'm not motivated by anger. I'm motivated by the realization that I would never be truly welcome in that house unless I held the keys. She began to sob, a torrent of raw, helpless grief, begging me to change my mind. But my resolve was firm. What they didn't know was that the legal paperwork had already been filed. A notice of possession change was scheduled for delivery that afternoon, and as a final, decisive measure, I had retained a property management company, owned by a fellow veteran, to oversee the transition. They would arrive the following day to conduct a formal inspection, not to evict them, not yet, but to serve as an undeniable reminder that they were no longer in control. That afternoon, I sat by the fire, wrapped in a thick blanket, and watched the flames. There were no presents, no family gathering, but there was peace and justice, and something more satisfying than any holiday melody: control. I had not set out to destroy their world. I had simply reminded them whose name was on the title. And this year, for once, Christmas belonged to me. My property manager called me late that afternoon. Ethan, we've completed the walkthrough. Your family wasn't pleased to see us, but we kept it professional, as you instructed. What's the condition? I asked. He let out a long breath. Superficially, it's fine. But there are underlying issues. Leaks in the foundation, a half-finished attic conversion, mold under the windowsill. And here's the kicker. 2 of the bedrooms are occupied by tenants. College students, by the look of it. I was speechless for a moment. They've been renting out rooms? It appears so. Under-the-table cash transactions. No lease agreements. That was the final confirmation. They hadn't just emotionally exiled me. They had turned my legal property into a clandestine business venture, all while telling me I was not welcome. A wave of something colder than anger washed over me. It was the sting of profound disrespect. They had used my good name to secure their home, filled it with strangers, and then had the audacity to tell me that I did not belong. That night, I composed a second letter. This one was not polite. Effective January 2nd, you are hereby served a 30-day notice of management transition and potential termination of your residency. Your sublease agreements are illegal and have been voided. All rent collection is suspended. The property is now under formal investigation for numerous code violations. All future communication must be directed to my legal counsel. I signed it with my full name and rank: Ethan Monroe, Sergeant First Class, U.S. Army, retired. Legal co-owner, 12. Winmere Lane. I forwarded the document to their lawyer, Harold. Then, I sent a simple 3-word text to my sister. Check the mail. Within an hour, the frantic calls resumed. Voicemails filled with pleading and panic, including one from my father. I didn't listen to any of them. There's a moment known to every soldier. It's the instant you realize you've made it through the fire, that you've survived. In that quiet aftermath, there is a unique kind of power. That is what I felt now. They could rage, they could weep, they could bargain. But I had survived them, and they were now tenants in my house, subject to my rules. Come January, they would learn the true meaning of the word unwelcome. Not from a place of malice, but because I no longer required a seat at their table. I owned the entire dining room. January 2nd dawned cold and gray. The air was biting, and the driveway at 12 Windermere Lane was crowded with cars, two of which were unfamiliar to me. I did not go alone. I arrived with my property manager, a locksmith, and a portfolio of legal documents. I wore a dark overcoat, my boots polished to a high shine, and my old dog tags. I was not there for a fight. I was there to finalize a transaction, to bring this chapter to a close. My father answered the door. His face was flushed, and he was sweating in the frigid air. "Ethan, what is the meaning of this circus?" he demanded. I walked past him without a word. My house. My terms. My mother stood at the foot of the stairs, clutching a rosary that only ever made an appearance during moments of high drama. Chloe was slumped on the couch, her face pale and drawn. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I took a steadying breath. This is a legal transition of ownership. As of this morning, I am exercising my full rights to this property. You have 30 days to decide. Sign a formal tenancy agreement under my terms, or find a new place to live. My father's composure shattered. "A new place? You can't do this. This is our home." "No," I corrected him, my voice level and firm. "It is my asset." "I built this house with my own 2 hands," he bellowed. "And you defaulted on the loan," I retorted, my voice like ice. "And you manipulated your 24-year-old son into signing it over to you so you could save face with the bank." That silenced him. I surveyed the living room, a space filled with ghosts of my childhood. The spot on the mantel where my boot camp photo once stood was now conspicuously bare. They had tried to erase me, and now all that was left was an empty space. I pressed on. The unauthorized tenants have been informed of the situation. If they are not gone within 10 days, they will be charged with trespassing. And if any of you attempt to intimidate them, damage the property, or interfere with this process in any way, I will not hesitate to pursue criminal charges. My mother's voice trembled. "But where will we go?" I met her gaze without flinching. "I don't know, Mom. Perhaps you'll have to spend next Christmas somewhere else." She collapsed into tears. Chloe stood, looking as if she wanted to say something, an apology perhaps, but I raised a hand to stop her. "I don't need your words. I needed them 10 years ago. What I need now are boundaries." As I left, the locksmith was installing a new lock on the front door. The snow crunched under my boots. The air was crisp and clean, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like a son. I felt like a man who had returned from the brink, stronger than they had ever imagined. They could call it cold-hearted. I called it survival. The final notice expired on the last day of January. They did not contest it. There were no last-minute appeals, no dramatic standoffs. Only the heavy silence that falls when people finally understand that you are not bluffing. I arrived the next morning, the new key in my hand. The house was vacant. There was no note, no word of farewell. Only a hollow echo that greeted me as I stepped over the threshold, onto the very spot where I had once stood in my uniform, longing for a welcome that never came. I moved through the empty rooms slowly. In Chloe's old bedroom, I found a forgotten tag from a ski trip I hadn't been invited on. In the living room, a long scratch scarred the floor where the coffee table had been. A table I had purchased with my very first deployment check, a gift they had later insisted was a loan. I stared at that mark for a long time, not with anger, but with a clear-eyed recognition of how deep the damage can go when your pain is invisible to others. I did not weep. Instead, I opened the back door and let the cold wind sweep through the house. I stood there, the winter sun on my face. This was not revenge. It was a restoration of my boundaries, of my dignity, of the name they had tried to excise from the family history. I converted the house into a transitional home for female veterans, women with stories that mirrored my own, stories of difficult homecomings, of rejection, and of the long, arduous journey to reclaim their identities beyond their service. We named it the Monroe House. When reporters began to inquire, drawn by a local news story about a veteran who had reclaimed his home from the family that had cast him out, I did not share the whole truth. My purpose was not to shame them. It was to heal myself. So now, when people ask, was it worth it? I smile and say, more than you can possibly imagine. I do not see them. They do not call. But every Christmas, I light a candle on the porch. It is not for them, it is for me. It is for the boy who once stood outside this house in the snow, feeling like an outcast. He finally found his way home, and he made sure that no one like him would ever have to stand alone again.